What's up, family? I got a treat for y'all today, man. Who doesn't like a tier list video? We love ranking things. We love seeing other people's opinions about ranking things, and then where we disagree, having a, mental argument that we'll never actually have unless y'all leave a comment. Anyways, this video is gonna be fun and exciting. Thanks for clicking. In this tier list, we're ranking art mediums. So painting versus drawing versus whatever. They all evoke such different emotions for the person viewing it and for the person who made it themselves. I'm primarily an acrylic painter. I also use resin, which is a different type of medium. I actually didn't rank resin. I already filmed the tier list video. I didn't rank resin. Maybe I should have thrown it in there because I love me some resin. But I'm primarily using acrylic paint, but I also use watercolors, sometimes oil, sometimes graphite or charcoal or ink. There's a lot of things that I do, and as a YouTuber, I'm doing so many different types of art every time I produce a video. So there's 7 different types of fine art, something I didn't even know until I started doing some research for this video. But the 7 types of fine art are drawing, painting, sculpting, architecture, cinema, music, and theater. And to make a YouTube video, I'm required to do like at least 3 or 4 of those per every video. So drawing and painting. You listen to music during my videos, that's for sure, even though I'm not the one who makes it. And then, I do a little bit of acting here and there. So now when we're discussing art mediums, obviously there's a million different types, but there's some that are ultra famous, like drawing through pencils and with markers, and then acrylic paints and stuff like that. Then there's some that are super ultra respected, like sculpting and oil paints. Like you'd see those in an art gallery or a museum somewhere. And that's definitely influential on how people pick what mediums they want. But the other things are like ease of access and how much money you need to spend to be able to do this, and what skill level you need to have. Like if you're glass blowing, you can't just jump right into that. You're gonna burn yourself and get some major injuries. You really need to take classes. You need to have a studio space for that, all that kind of stuff. Very difficult to get into. And then you also have the question of profitability. Is whatever you're making something that can make you money if you're gonna do it full time? Not all artwork really can. I mean, if you're a goated artist, I'm sure, yes, it can. But for most people, colored pencils aren't gonna lead them to a successful life in terms of wealth and money income. But paints, maybe they will. So as artists, these are the things we need to consider when we choose our mediums. Man, I don't feel like you're a real YouTuber until you have a tier list video. So I've definitely been wanting to do this one for a while. I got my iPad, I got my notebook, I got my cup of water. I'm ready to go, so let's dive right in. All right, so the first thing I'd like to acknowledge is the fact that I'm gonna go over a ton of art mediums, but I'm obviously gonna omit a ton of them. There's so many art mediums in the world, there's no way I could talk about them all. Additionally, I'm not doing like the music or singing, dancing type art. It's more the painting, drawing, physical, building type art. Anyways, also criteria for this video is 3 separate things that I'm judging based off. How much I like to do that art form. I haven't done all of them, so I can't do strictly based off that. How much I like to see this art form. So whenever you see them, like how much emotion it evokes out of me and just pure joy. And then also objectively where I think the world would value this art form. Like say if it was to be taken off the face of the planet, how much people would notice really. So those are the 3 criteria. So we're gonna jump right in to acrylic paint because it's like the GOAT, it's the OG, it's the classic. Oh yeah, one more thing. Tiers S, A, B, C, D. Obviously S in tier list is the best, A is second best, yada, yada, yada. So acrylic paint, obviously it's like the starter for all art. Like I guess maybe pencil and drawing, but acrylic paint is like the start of, oh, I'm actually an artist, let me get into painting. And I still use acrylic paint primarily to this day, which just tells you how wide of a range acrylic paint can cover, from little children to fully experienced artists. When I see acrylic paint and paintings painted with acrylics, it evokes like happiness and joy, welcoming playfulness. Those are some of the emotions that I feel like I get from that. And that's largely because like the bright colors and aesthetics and simple layering, and it's not too complicated, it's all fun, it's very bright, it's very clearly made how it's made. Acrylic paint is I want to say S tier because everyone can use it, but I don't want to put something in S tier right away. So I'm gonna put it in A tier with maybe I'll move it later. Maybe I'll adjust it. Second, we got oil paint. Oil paint is arguably the most goated art form throughout history. Historians accredit so much to oil paint. It's so widely respected across the world. It's very expensive to use and a very difficult process to get into. I've still barely touched it, even though I've been an artist for many years now. It's goated in terms of the top tier artists always use acrylic or oil paint. So it's definitely at least A tier, maybe S tier again. I want to put it S tier, but because how expensive it can be to use and how difficult the process of getting into it for like a starter level artist is, I'm gonna put it A tier for now. Third one we got is watercolor, and I combined watercolor and gouache into one category. I like watercolor a lot. I think it's smooth. I think it's super easy to travel with. That's primarily how I use watercolor, is when I'm traveling. So you can take watercolors with you anywhere because they're very small, very easy to bring. I feel like it creates the emotion of playfulness, a bit haziness, and like comforting feeling, because you can often see the paper through watercolor like finished products, so it doesn't feel too high pressure, like trying to cover everything and make everything look perfect. I think watercolor is good. I'm gonna put it in B tier. Colored pencils. Man, colored pencils feels like a children's art form. I really can't think of many like top tier artists who use colored pencils. That's actually a lie. My dad has like a very nice framed piece in his house that's primarily colored pencil, but that's like a very few and far between. I feel like colored pencil, it's not that it's bad, it's just that it takes so many layers to get rid of the pencil strokes and marks. It's very entry level, pretty cheap, doesn't exactly make you feel like, wow, this is something someone spent a ton of time on. I know some people can make huge colored pencil drawings. I'm gonna put it in D tier. No offense. Next, graphite and charcoal. So this is pencil, this is charcoal. Charcoal and graphite, the darkest darks are obviously black, they're very dark. And then the lightest lights are usually the white part of the paper. It's very drastic, it's a gradient, but the simplified color palette is cool to look at. I think people make really cool art forms with these. I like it. I'm gonna put it C tier. Is it worse than watercolor? I feel like you use this in all art at one stage, but a lot of art isn't finished with it. In fact, you're covering it up, but I don't blame graphite and charcoal for that. I just think that it's part of its practicality. I'm gonna put it B tier. I think it's on the same level as watercolor. All right, so next we got digital art. So iPad drawing, anything that you're doing on the computer. This is far and away the most practical. You bring one thing, your computer, your iPad, wherever you go, and you can do any type of digital art you want. There's unlimited possibilities. Consistently new apps are being created and new programs and stuff to improve digital art. I've used the same Procreate app since I started doing digital art, but there's so many more than that. Limitless possibilities. Digital art is definitely B. Actually, I was gonna say A, but I'm gonna put it in B, just for the one thing that digital art, it feels kind of like fake art, which is not its fault. That we want to see something physical, and you can print out digital art. But when it's so cool, and especially with AI these days, it feels kind of fake. It feels kind of not tacky. And I don't want to disrespect anybody, because a lot of this digital art stuff actually takes so long to create. But I like I like having the feel of a brush in my hand or a pencil in my hand doing digital art. I don't like to do it as much, although I do it a ton because it's practical. Maybe it should be A. I'm gonna put it on the front of B, but it's pretty close to A. All right, so next we got oil pastels. This is another like flashback to my childhood. It gives me nightmares of getting it all over my finger and then having a finished drawing, putting it in a notebook or something, and it's still rubbing off all the time later. Man, oil pastels were frustrating as a kid, and maybe I just didn't know what I was doing. In fact, I definitely didn't know what I was doing. But oil pastels are definitely, I think, more of a children's art medium than, you know, most adults. I think my grandma really likes oil pastel. I'm gonna put it C tier, no disrespect. I just don't think the final drawings are as impressive. I think they look peaceful and cozy and fun to make, but I don't think anyone, or not too many people, see a final oil pastel painting or drawing, whatever you call it, and are like wowed. So I'm gonna put it C tier. I'm pretty comfortable with that. Next we have inking. I really like inking, and I think some of the coolest, like most powerful art comes from how simple inking is. It's like graphite, where it's like the darkest darks are obviously black and the whitest whites are obviously the white paper you're putting it on, whatever. But there's no gradient. I mean, there can be if you water it down, but a lot of the time there's no gradient. It's a stark contrast from all the way black to all the way white. And I think that's super cool. I think it's super powerful, especially some of the Asian inking that you've seen throughout history. Some of these are super cool and powerful, historical as well. I'm going B tier. Almost A tier. I'm going B tier because I don't think too many people use this all the time. I think it's slightly less easy to get into. Even though it's less strokes, it's like less is more, which is kind of an advanced technique, believe it or not. Anyways, I'm pretty confident with B tier, although some people can make this A or S tier, definitely. All right, so last of the drawing type mediums is markers, and I know a lot of people who dislike the aesthetic of a marker, and I think that's fine. I don't blame them for it, but markers really introduced me into art. I watched a lot of YouTube artists who were strictly marker drawers and got me into like Copic pens and stuff like that, and those were just so cool to me. And I still use them sometimes, not as much, because it's hard to make like a really wow, amazing big art form out of markers. You would just need so many, and they run out and they dry up. Really, really cool for me for a lot of my life. They're starting to fall off a little bit. I'm gonna put them B tier. They can't possibly be C tier because so many people love them, and they had a big part in my life. But objectively, I think B tier is a good place to put them. All right, so the next category of mediums is sculpting type mediums, and we're starting with wood. But before we get to wood sculpting specifically, I just want to talk about sculpting in general. I feel like it's strong at conveying messages because you have a three-dimensional body to work from, so there's a lot you can say with it. And then also what you don't include in a sculpture is just as important to the overall image as what you do include, and I think that is super cool. Like if you omit something that we expect to see on a person or something like that, it can be super cool. It can create all types of effect. I think sculpting is sweet, something I really haven't gotten into in my personal life, but that I'd like to in the future. And I think a lot of very advanced artists, even if you know them as painters and stuff, are actually really good sculptors as well. So wood sculpting, I think, is just, it might be the coolest type of sculpting. It's like, it's so natural. It comes from the earth and you're cutting at it. There's different types of wood. You don't need colors because it's already like naturally textured. Wood sculpting is instantly A tier. Obviously very difficult to get into, but if you really, really wanted to, you could go find sticks in your backyard or a branch or something and start sculpting it, because it is everywhere. I think that's slightly easier in terms of convenience than some of the other types of sculpting. But next we got clay sculpting. Fun, brings me back to my childhood. This isn't exactly like doing clay on a potter's wheel, but more like sculpting and making faces or masks or whatever you're making out of the clay. I think this is cool. Clay kind of can suck to work with. I'm gonna put it B tier. That might be a personal thing. I think objectively people might want it top of B tier, bottom of A tier, but I think B tier is a good spot to put it. Next we got stone sculpting, which I think is one of the most like wow type art forms we have on this list. If you can get a good stone sculpture, especially if it's like big, first of all, it will be so heavy and hard to make. I don't understand how people can do this, but if you can, it can be one of the most like mind-blowing, like astonishing art forms we have, and that's why I think it is pretty insane. I'm gonna go A tier. Obviously I haven't done any of these sculpting, so it's just based on what I see and objectively how I think people feel and the emotions it evokes. But I'm gonna go A tier for stone sculpting, just because how cool a final piece can be. Next we got metal. Metal is really cool. A lot of people can do a lot of things with it. I got a little metal sculpture as a little kid and I always really liked it. Nothing against metal, just not too exciting. Like, feels kind of everywhere. I don't know. It feels like a stop sign. Like, that's kind of like a metal sculpture. You see metal built things everywhere, so they don't blow you away. I'm gonna go C tier. And then bone sculpting is next, and bone sculpting is really cool. Like, if you can get like a mammoth tusk or something, I always end up feeling really bad when I look at it, even though they probably just found this bone. They probably didn't poach it from an animal, but I always end up feeling really bad, and I never can get that kind of invasive, deathly vibe out of my brain when I'm looking at stone sculpting. But I think some of them can be really cool, or not stone sculpting, bone sculpting, excuse me. I think it can be really cool. Also think like a shark tooth or something when it has something sculpted or carved into it. Insanely cool, but kind of creepy and kind of invasive. I'm gonna go C tier. Next we got plastic, and I have an image of a 3D printing machine because I think 3D printers use plastic primarily. In fact, I know they do, which is cool, and 3D printing is definitely like revolutionary at this point. But a large portion of plastic sculpting is like the recycling sculpting in the bottles and stuff like that, put into pieces that kind of symbolize protecting our planet and trying to be thoughtful about waste and stuff like that, and that's really cool. But similar to bone sculpting, I kind of always view it with a negative viewpoint because I'm like sad about all these plastic bottles and stuff that we've been wasted. So it doesn't exactly make me happy. It does evoke emotions out of me, so if that is your goal, which it is a lot of people's goal in art, then it is doing that. But I'm gonna put plastic in C tier just for the waste and how I feel. 3 more total. I just listed them as other type mediums. We're starting with glass, and glass blowing is insane. There's this museum in Seattle right next to the Space Needle. I forget what it's called, the Chihuly Museum or something. Mind-blowing what people can do with glass. The colors can be insane. Obviously it's very fragile, so you feel like it's a very like wow art form, because how can someone build something with something so fragile? Glass, A tier. Next we got photography, and photography I know is different from these other types. You can't make art medium tier without photography, because photography is the basis of all art in my opinion. And photography, it makes you feel connected, it makes you feel worldly, it makes you feel involved and in control, because you take something that's like larger than life, like a huge mountain or something, and you put it in your hands in this one little photo, and that's just so cool. It's like things that used to be out of reach, like if you're using a drone and taking a photo, now all of a sudden you just have that in the palm of your hand. Photography gives you this control that other things don't, and I think that's insane. Photography, S tier, and I'm gonna add one other to S tier at the end, because S tier should have at least 2. And this last one, collaging, definitely not S tier. This is fun, it's cool, feels very childlike, so no disrespect to all my collagers out there. There are some of you who make insane work. Collaging is going D tier. And so what one am I gonna bring up with photography to be at the top of the art mediums tier tiers? And I'm going with acrylic paint. I'm sorry to all my oil painters out there. You guys are goated. I respect all of you. But personally, I think acrylic paint can be from little children to very, very advanced professionals, and it always looks different. It can be very vibrant. It cannot be if you don't want it to be. I think acrylic paint is goated. That might be me personally, but this is my opinion. This is my video. So thanks for clicking, guys. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed making a tier list. I really will do more different types of videos in the future, not just always the same type of video. If you watch this far, I really appreciate y'all. Subscribe to the channel. We have fun videos every Wednesday and Friday, usually one short and one full-length video. But I love you all. Peace and love, and have a good night.